So we have this idea of building this government, and the idea is we need to orient the government towards the good, and we need to separate and balance, because any one iteration can naturally fall. So our government has a lot of fail-safes, a lot of checks, right? That's why we talk about checks and balances, right? We're like, oh, it's a balance. So like they have no. There's internal fail-safes, or the way to look at impeachment isn't just a check and balance, it's a fail-safe. What happens if we get a president abusing the system in pursuit of his own power, in pursuit of his own legacy, in pursuit of his own traditional understanding? That's bad. By any iteration, that's bad. Guys, by an understanding of the foundational fathers, FDR is one of the worst presidents we've ever had. He showed no restraint towards the acquisition of power at all. Lyndon Baines Johnson showed no restraint towards the acquisition of power. And we rewarded them for that. We praised them for that. Even though what they did was unethical. They lied, they cheated, they stole. LBJ cheated overwhelmingly in an election. FDR lied his pants off. And we still rewarded that. Guys, if we're going to have this government, the government that the founding fathers framed, we're going to have to create a system by which we can secure virtue manifest in our elected politicians. They thought they did. They thought they did. And I would say the biggest detriment to our system today is we have removed that. We have said the guy that hits his hand on the podium the hardest, the person that lies the best, the person that manipulates the public media narrative the best, they win. And once they win, they're like, oh, they should have won. They have a mandate. They were the best liar among liars. Guys, in America today, consistently, one of the least trusted professions in all of the United States is what? Politician. Why does that not concern us? We'll go to bat over gay marriage. We'll go to bat over abortion. We'll protest and rebel. But you're telling me that only about 28% of Americans trust politicians consistently, and we're doing nothing about that? We haven't conceptually built anything that maybe could create a more trustworthy government? They're like, oh, that's just the way it is. Is it? Is that just the way it is? These are things I think we have to orient ourselves to. The founding fathers did. They said our government should be what? It should be honorable. It should be wise. It should be virtuous. So how do you select honorable, wise individuals? That's messy. And I don't think we fully have solved that equation. Right? He says, this is Montesquieu. Baron de Montesquieu, writing in 1748, he's a French philosopher. So once again, we're looking outside of America to foundational elements, right? Like I said, America's not going to be anything brand new. We're not, right? We kind of have this idea like these a bunch of white guys got together in Philadelphia and like the divine elements bestowed upon them proper government and we ran with it. That's not the way this works. They literally were some of the most researched, most knowledgeable, most learned individuals of their time. Right? That's specifically what they were. Guys, Alexander Hamilton was bloody brilliant. He didn't move up because he was rich, because he was elite. He moved up because he was brilliant. And he applied his brilliance to a collective good. In America, we have always seemed to appreciate the bloody brilliant and those that use their brilliance for the collective good. So we're leaning on a lot of really good ideas that weren't always our own. But we're merging those ideas. We're crafting them. We're organizing them in different ways. So Baron de Montesquieu, writing in 1748, says, in every form of government, there are three sorts of power. The legislative, the executive, respect to things depend on the law of nations, and the executive regard things depend upon civil law. Montesquieu says in every form of government, there are three sorts of power. You have a legislative power, the power to make laws. You have an executive power, the power to enforce those laws. And you have an executive power that depend on civil law. He said, by virtue of the first, the lawmakers, the prince or magistrate enacts temporary or perpetual laws, and amends or abrogates those that have already been enacted. So by the first, they make rules. The second power every government has is to make peace or war, send or receive embassies, establish public security, and provide against invasion. The third power every government has is punishes criminals, determines the disputes that arise between individuals. The latter we shall call the judiciary power, and the other simply the executive power state. So ask yourself this. A French philosopher in 1748 who has studied the history of governments and has tried to figure out why governments fall and why governments succeed, has concluded that in every form of government, regardless of what you call them, only three powers exist. The power to make rules, the powers to protect the environment by which those rules are made and enforced, and the power to enforce and judge those rules. Guys, what should we be taking away here? We look at America like, oh, well, the American form of government, we have a constitution that sets up a what? A legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judiciary. The latter we shall call the judiciary, and the other simply the executive. In other words, we're stealing. The Americans aren't coming up with this number. They really aren't. We're stealing ideas, we're adapting those ideas. I'm telling you, these ideas are not perfectly, we haven't figured them out. Right? In my work, A More Perfect Parent, I actually make this argument for parenting. It's like if you have a parent and you're concerned about the power, because your power has to be balanced out with the autonomy of your child. So in what ways does a parent's power manifest? Not that hard. A power of the parent has manifests where? In the rules they make for the household. How are the rules made in your household? Is there a consensus of it? Do your children have any say in the making of those rules? Right? Or is it my house, my rules? Are you the effective tyrant of those rules? Well, once the rules are made, what happens? Right? You also have the power to make peace or war, sends or receives embassies, and establishes public security and provides against invasion. So we have some type of manifestation of the carrying out of the rules and the protecting the castle. I actually argue in my philosophical works that there's 4 powers, not 3. I think Montesquieu is wrong. I think the executive power is further broken in. I think the power to make safe the castle or make peace and war is different from the power to execute the law internally. Because I can go and my kids have certain rules that happen in my house, but there's a separate power to protect the castle. The presidential power is the power to protect the castle. So when people ask me, like, Crosby, you haven't voted for a president, you felt qualified for the office. No. None of the presidents have been qualified for the office in my lifetime. Like, well, what does the president do? Guys, if I'm voting for president, I don't care what his opinion is of gay marriage, of abortion, of health care. If you're like, but it's a president, guys, he has no lawmaking power. The Congress, this one, that's who makes the law. So all law goes through here. So what does the president do? He makes peace or war. The president has power over nations, over the life and death of nations. So when I vote for a president, I want a president that's sound in foreign policy, sound in diplomacy, that understands how to navigate disputes, how to settle differences, how to manage the difficulty of executing law. Guys, police officers, one of the biggest issues with police officers today is that you only see them when you're being gone onto. If you only saw your dad when he was yelling at you, how good would that relationship manifest? You think you'd have a great relationship with your parent if you only saw them when they got on you? Yes or no? So why are we having cops engaging in more positive policing? Actually increasing the positive elements. Actually seeing cops outside of the argument where they're getting onto you. But notice every power is going to be made at the expense of those underneath that power. So when a cop exercises power, that is an imbalance of power, and the responsibility is on the cop to manage that power in a way that doesn't infuriate a rebellious reaction. That's complicated to do. So how do we do that? The other thing is, we often look at cops and say, well, the cops, we should have just cops. The cops should do the right thing. Cops aren't there to do the right thing. Cops are there to do what? enforce the law and make safe the castle. Guys, the cops aren't going to stop and ask questions. Their job is to enforce the law and make safe the castle. If your action is causing any potential instability or threat, they will neutralize you because their highest priority is to make safe the castle. But that's why we have the judiciary. So that if a rule is enforced incorrectly or abusively, now the judicial department carries that navigational thing. So if we do have frustration, if we do have rebellion, there is a path, a platform for civilized redress. I am convinced that we fundamentally don't understand this. Parents don't get this, schools don't get this. If schools would understand this, right here, just this. If I control all power over my students, if I make all the rules, if I enforce the rules, if I execute the rules, what am I? Let's look. He says the political liberty of the subject, notice we're still talking about Baron de Montesquieu through the law of 1748. He says the political liberty of the subject is tranquility of the mind, arising from the opinion that each person has of his safety. So the grand goal is that people should have political liberty. They should have a reasonable opportunity to move freely within a given society. Right? So what we have is in a good society, you should be able to move about freely without worrying about any type of tumult or calamity. However, that political liberty is put in threat. He says in order to have this liberty, it is requisite that the government be so constituted as one man need not be afraid of another. So if I'm building a government of men over other men, then the government is composed of men. You as a parent are composed of humans. So I ask in my work, I ask parents all the time, you think the biggest threat to your kids is external? You know how many psychologists get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by navigating the historic abuse of parents? I gave an interview for my book about a week and a half ago. And in the interview, it's a press release that's coming out. They were asking me, it's like, what do you think if you kind of narrowed down the most difficult lesson from parents? He said, what is the hardest thing as a parent to understand? And my response to that question is, I was like, the hardest thing for a parent to understand is that they actually are the potential greatest detriment to their child's long-term happiness and security. Parents automatically assume a goodness. They assume that I am here, I love my kid, I'm trying to benefit my kid, I want the best for my kid. And parents don't understand that even in your best intent, you abuse, you neglect, you tyrannize your children because you do not allow them an autonomy of existence. You deny them the very ability to construct their own narrative. You are a tyrant in every form. But I was only trying to, I know what's best for them. But I love them. What is love? And I have moms, a lot of moms. There's a lot of abusive mothering happening right now. Right now. We often think, well, the man, we don't like this patriarchal society. Guys, the father can be a tyrant, yes. But the mom can't do it. It just so happens, women in the room, 9 times out of 10, if you have a problem with the parent, it's not your dad. Men typically have daddy issues, right? Guys typically compete and frustrate the men. Most women carry long-term frustrations from their mother. I was never good enough for her. She never accepted me. She always tried to live her life through me. She always wanted me to be different than I am, right? This is tyranny. Why? Because your mom made the rules, enforced the rules. She wanted to take what was yours, the liberty of your being, the autonomy of yourself. As a parent, we have to construct a government that our kids need not be afraid of us. That our kids aren't afraid of our correction, that our kids aren't afraid of our judgment, that our kids aren't afraid of what we might tell them, that we actually inform them in such a way where they feel not violated by our involvement, but they feel benefited from our involvement. He says, when the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person or in the same body of magistrates, there can be no liberty. So if I combine the power to make the rules and the power to enforce the rules, there can be no liberty. Because all I do is make up new rules to justify my enforcement of the rules. So a parent that is unrestrained simply make up parents. They make up their own rules. So they tell a kid, okay, do what I say, not what I do. It's different for me. You can't have ice cream, but I can. You can't have this, but I can. You shouldn't say this, but I can. You can't backtalk your teacher, but I can. Why? You know how confused kids get all the time? Go to Walmart sometimes. I don't shop at Walmart, I just pick on Walmart a lot. But you go to Walmart, Target, and whatnot, and you see these parents all the time. Right? Kids will start fighting the basket, and they'll start hitting each other. It's inevitable, it'll happen. And the parents go to resist. They go up to a kid, they go, don't hit. Look at the face on the child. The parent walks up to the kid and says, don't hit. It doesn't matter. In the concrete mind of a child, when you say, don't hit, what did you just communicate to that child? Are you not supposed to hit? That's not what you communicated because you just hit him. So you communicated to the child that you can hit so long as you're the biggest person in the room. That the biggest person can hit. So what happens when mom's not there? What happens to the younger siblings? They get hit. And they get hit a lot. When you start looking at this, if you don't start parsing this out, the lessons we teach are actually quite profound. And a lot of lessons we teach without doing it intentionally. Right? So people always ask me, like, yeah, but Crosby, what about things like alcohol and other stuff? Like, there is different. I have rules with my kids. We talk about it. Right? Right now, my kids obviously aren't allowed to drink. Right? I've let them taste things. I have no issue with that. Right? My daughter first tasted whiskey in the 7th grade because she wanted to try it. I'm like, yeah, sure, here. Well, I'll let you try whiskey because I was expecting that. I was expecting my 7th grade daughter to be like, God, burns, because my wife hadn't tried whiskey. She was like 26, 27 the first time. I'm like, just try it. It's whiskey. And she's like, oh, it burns. Oh, yeah. I was expecting it from my 7th grade daughter. So I gave her a little bit, just enough to taste. She tries it. She's like, ooh, that is good. Not yet. But what I do is, like, if it's different between me and them, if I get to drink and they can't, why? I sit down and explain. The reason why is alcohol alters the development of the brain. And until your brain is fully developed, alcohol causes a potential larger detriment to you than it does an adult brain. So before your brain's developed, you really shouldn't be on any chemical substance whatsoever. I will repeat that as many times as it needs to for parents to understand that. Until you are fully developed, you should not have a child on any chemical substance, period. Period. Full stop, finale. It is messing with the wiring of the juvenile brain. Literally, we know this. We're sticking chemicals and hormones that fundamentally mess with that wiring. I'll leave that to you. So we have a group of boys that can't sit still in school. We're like, oh, we need to do what? We need to give them a chemical. Drugs. I always have the number of people in America like, oh, marijuana should be legalized. It's not harmful. Have you researched it? Have you actually looked into it? Especially early exposure to marijuana? It's a chemical that messes with the rewiring of the brain. The earlier exposed you were to marijuana, the less likely that you will achieve your highest possible IQ. In fact, early exposure to marijuana actually decreases your IQ roughly from anywhere from 2 to 6 points. It retards the development of the more mature parts of your brain, but specifically the frontal lobe. We know this. We're just now knowing this. because we haven't done research. So a lot of people looked at the absence of research as a clear path of there is no harmful stuff. Guys, these are complicated. The thing about making the rules is this. Remember, rules should be done based on a collective assembly pursuing wisdom, not political opinions. Our lawmakers should be separate, should be out here. So when I make laws in my house, we sit down. And all laws are made through a deliberate assembly. Bring the research, bring the analysis. What is the best practice for all of us? If I don't want my kids to be on their phone, what should I not be on? My phone. You know, parents are like, screens are bad, and they're constantly on their phones. Constantly. But if a parent can make the law and execute the law, then what protects you from house rules? Them just making up whatever law they want. The best example of this I have is we were on a trip, and I will let you know I was raised by what I would consider a very totalitarian father at the time. My father and I did not get along growing up. I was the manifestation of rebellion to a large extent, and I didn't even understand a lot of this until much later. So when I started studying political theory and my own rearing, it really became fascinating to me. I'm understanding why I did what I did, but then also why my father did what he did. And my father and I have a good relationship today. We've kind of worked through a lot of stuff. But as a teenager, there was this strong element of my house, my rules, I'm the protectorate, you don't understand what you're doing, and I will do what needs to be done. And so my father had a rule about music. No secular music. Now, that was me. So I grew up in a very staunchly religious home, and my dad was like, no secular music at all. Right? So what is secular music? Secular music was defined in my household as any music, right, that was not Christian in nature. Right? Well, what does that mean? Dad often said that in the Bible it says that I would rather you be hot or cold than lukewarm. Because if you're lukewarm, I will spew you out of my mouth. So it had to be actively worshiping God, or it was secular and I wasn't allowed to listen to it. Now this was a problem for me, because I was a big, I say was, that's not true, I still am, but I'm a big fan of 90s boy bands. True story, right? Backstreet Boys, LFO, NSYNC, right? The whole 9 yards. I can sing and dance to all the routines, and you can judge me accordingly for that. However, they were all secular in nature, so they were all banned. So like my Backstreet Boys album was like contraband in my house. It literally was like sneaking the stuff through, like, oh no. Boys to Men, Usher, but we were on a trip, 7th to 8th grade at the time, and we got out of range of a Christian station, and my dad started searching the radio. And he found on the radio this kind of like 50s kind of Elvis Presley kind of vibe, like, you know, I hate Elvis Presley. To this day, I loathe Elvis Presley entirely, right? Like that whole kind of genre of early rock and roll, just, like literally like physical push towards vomiting every Christmas when you had like a, I loathe it. So my dad found this station, and I'm sitting in the back of our 15-passenger van because we had 8 kids. We had 8 kids. My parents had 8 kids, of which I was one of them. Right? So when you travel with 10 people, you got a big car. And Dad sits at the station, it's on, and I'm sitting there tolerating this. Yes, tolerating, because it is eating my soul. And it got to a point about an hour into this, like, Dad, we got to change the station. Enough is enough. Like, this is akin to torture. And he's like, no, this is good. This is good. The only station we have is either this or silence. I'm like, silence. For the love of God, silence is better than this. He's like, no, you sit down. You hush. And then as a kid, you always have this light where your brain's telling you to do something else, and then another part of your brain is like, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. Right? The brain's like, nah, we're going to fight this. And the other brain's like, don't do it. Nah, I was always really good about telling the side that said, you know, pursue peace to shut up. And I'm like, no, we're going to have this battle. Dad, didn't you say the rule was that we're not allowed to listen to secular music? Isn't that the rule? Aren't we currently in violation of the rule? 10 people in our van. It gets quiet real quick. Usually when I argue with my father, it got quiet real quick. And the only people talking are me and my dad. You say, no, this is good, this is fine. I've listened to this, and this is okay. Actually, no, Dad. Remember, your rule is that if it isn't actively praising God, that it's secular. Because remember, if it's not hot or cold, it's lukewarm, and lukewarm is the worst. So Elvis Presley, at the best iteration, is lukewarm. And I sat back in my chair, and like, Dad, I'll wait. I'll wait for another song. If I don't hear the name of Jesus, you're a hypocrite. My dad sat up there, and I could tell he was angry because he's bald and the back of his head turns red. Mom's in the pastor's seat. She starts praying. Dear Lord, don't let Daddy kill Philip. I didn't think about that story until I read this. What protects me from my dad just making up rules as he went? And what political liberty do our kids have if we just make up rules as we go? If we're not confined to the rules we make up, are the rules actually good enough themselves? Or are the rules only the value of the rule maker? Right? This is kind of the argument for Russia. Is there a higher virtue beyond Putin, or does every rule maker get to construct their rules because they are the rule maker? Is there any accountability to a consistency in the rules? Right? What Montesquieu is saying is that the highest order is political liberty, the understanding and acceptance of the autonomous being freely engaging in the world around them. And to do this, they have to be protected from what is considered as these rules that did not include them. These rules that change, that modify. The end of the story is actually quite anticlimactic. Dad got angry. He didn't say anything though. He reached up to the radio and turned it off. We had about a 2-hour drive to our campsite because that's the only way we could travel at the time because we were poor. His red kind of diminished. We get to the campsite and I was waiting. Dad perfected the art growing up of letting punishment linger. Like it was delayed punishment. It was like, you just wait. Like even if you just wait till Dad gets home. You just wait. Like my mom never really punished me. I don't remember once ever like my mom spanking me. But if I did something wrong, it was like, you wait till your father gets home. And my father always came home. Right? So it's always like this delayed punishment. So I'm sitting in the back of the van like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. And it's coming, like the hammer's gonna come. We get to our campsite, we get out, Dad says nothing. We go to bed, Dad says nothing. We get up the next morning, Dad says nothing. We move on. Nothing said. And I didn't think about that. Again, until I read Montesquieu. And I started looking at Montesquieu, I'm like, if my dad sat and thought about this, what could he say? If parents reflect on their rules, and sometimes the protestation of their children, are parents justified in half of what they do? Or would we realize in proper reflection that we really don't have a defense of a lot of the abuses we levy against our children? If there's not a system to separate the lawmaking from the execution, there is no political liberty. So how do I construct this as a parent? Like I said, in my house, we make no rules without the consent of our kids. We've done this for a very long time. I've had people attack me, they've questioned me. They're like, wait till your kids become teenagers. My eldest is 17. And every time, if we want a new rule, if we want a new process, we sit everybody down, we talk, we get insight, we get discussion, we come to a consensus, okay, but this is how we're going to move forward as a family within this house. We create a political culture together, and our political culture orients itself towards best practices. So it wasn't too long ago, my daughter Jaden, about 2 years ago, we had a rule in our house, standing rule at the time, no Christmas music until after Thanksgiving. That was a rule. Right? Thanksgiving gets Thanksgiving. Christmas is Christmas. We honor all holidays. And my daughter was, going into the Thanksgiving holiday, and she says, I want to call a family meeting. I'm like, okay, because they have the right to do so. My kids can call a family meeting. They can actually bring up the violations that I have done. Right? We can talk about this in family assembly. Right? So she says, I want to call a family meeting. All right, we sat down. Like, what is your point here? What do you want to? She said, I think we should change the rule on Christmas music. I think we should listen to. I just think that rule's dumb. And I'm like, okay, we can have a conversation about this, right? Who else is with Jaden? And like all of my kids are like, yeah, we want to listen to Christian music. I'm like, arguments? And I let them make arguments. I do. I let them. And one of my second oldest daughter, I think, at the time, she was like, yeah, but think about it, Dad. She said, one of your favorite Christmas albums is Vince Guaraldi's Peanuts album. And Snoopy is not unique to Christmas. That's a Thanksgiving-ish holiday with so there's already a natural overlap in the holidays. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And I was like, so are we just going to listen to Christmas music year-round, or do you have another timeline in mind? She was like, well, what if we just did it after Halloween? So going from Thanksgiving all the way through my birthday, it gives us 2 months to appreciate Christmas and the holidays collectively. It's like, fine, right? I don't like it, but fine. And so we go around and we always start voting with the youngest and the oldest, because I never want the youngest to be tyrannized by the vote of the oldest. We almost do that the opposite way in the legislature. We always let the most senior people, but if your most senior people vote first, what happens is your least senior people tend to vote for the affirmation of who they want, right? So we always vote with the less first all the way up to the greatest, because it is less likely that I'm going to be swayed by the opinions of my 11-year-old than my 11-year-old will be swayed by the opinions of me. Right? That makes sense? Yeah. And so we always start at the young, and my youngest daughter, Avery, like yay or nay, right? Yay, we change the rule. Nay, we keep it. Daughter Avery, yay. All right, I want to listen to more. Fine. My son, Josh, what do you think? I'm in favor of it. Okay. Emily, what do you think? I'm in favor of it. Okay. Jaden, she brought it up. We all knew how she was going to vote. And Jaden's yay. By that point, they have 4. The rule carries. Right? They've already won. Right? I've lost the day. But we still complete the voting process. So I go to my wife, ask, what do you think? And she looks at me. And my wife and I always vote the same. It's one of our consistencies in parenting. We always vote the same, because we always have at least 2 on the same page. All I have to do is convince 1 kid of our narrative, and we're good, right? So I said, seriously, parenting, you can set this up and still outwit your kids sometimes. Literally, they're 11. You should be able to be smarter than they are, right? Nonetheless, I look at my wife and say, babe, how are we voting on this? She was like, I'm voting with the kids. What? You're going against me? And then by the time it got to me, I'm like, fine, I will vote in the affirmative as well. We'll have a unanimous consent for a new rule. And so doing, we've purposely constructed the Constitution in my house where the lawmaking is separate, but it creates conversation. One of the things I'm going to tell you about lawmaking in the United States is a lot of time it's not what produces from the lawmaking process that's valuable. It's not that, right? Parents often tell me, like, yeah, but what if you get a bad rule? What if it mess up? If you understand the lawmaking process is a stabilizing process in pursuit of wisdom. Here's the value of the lawmaking process. If you're a parent and you give your kids part of the process, then what happens? Every time you make a rule, you have a conversation. You elevate them to having a conversation about wisdom, about virtue, about right action. You give them license. You build what? A stronger community. The purpose of lawmaking isn't to guarantee perfect laws. The purpose of lawmaking is to guarantee a stabilized society, because every group gets a seat at the table and has some say in the process. So it means we see every person in the process. That's the value of the lawmaking. So when we get to Congress, Congress should not be 2 political parties beating each other up all the time. Congress should be a dynamic conversation of a multitude of interests and opinions and beliefs, trying to orient our nation towards the collective highest good. Is much going to be done? No. No. You're not going to get a lot out of that process. You're not going to get a lot of rules. But the more you talk with somebody else, the more respect you build for other people, the more mutual accountability you build, the more understanding you build. It is that mutual accountability that becomes the value of a diversified lawmaker. Guys, we have completely perverted that narrative. We have said now diversification is like racial diversification, right? Diversification is equal party members. No, diversification is you recognize individuality. and you include as many points of view as you can. Points of view. Not races, not religions. Points of view. And not just any point of view. You want a point of view that's oriented towards a wise, logical end. Guys, the point of view we want to bring it is wisdom. Like I said, guys, we have a Hobbesian point of view, a Lockean point of view, and a Rousseauian point of view for the basis of government. They're all reasonable. People are like, oh, we want all opinions. Guys, no, we don't. Not all opinions are wise. You can get 15 wise individuals in a room, they're going to disagree. But the conversation is going to be edifying. If you get 15 people that were in the room only concerned with their own opinion and their own freedom, how's that conversation going to go? You tell me. Huh? Or you're just going to learn to tolerate everybody's opinion and go your own way. Like, we hear everybody out, everybody has an opinion, and everybody is valuable, but do you really value anybody's opinion but your own? If you're told that your opinion's right, what do you need from me? What do you need from any other human being? Nothing. A wise approach is to say you have to find intelligent people, surround yourself with them, and learn from them. Let them speak to you. And give into that group to the extent that you can. Give your thoughts when you've developed thoughts, which means if you're going to be part of a collective wise society, you have to develop what? Wisdom of your own. You have to develop intelligence of your own. You have to study and understand something where your expertise becomes valued by the collective. You have to accept that your ability just to be free to everyone isn't enough, but more than that, it's actually a perverted understanding of your being. That you need to be the best version of you. You need to provide something to the collective worth them saying, you know what, that's interesting. That's a good point. I haven't thought about that before. You brought something to my being that's different, that benefited me. Notice what we're trying to do is very different. He says, again, there can be no liberty of the power of judging beyond separated from the legislative executive power. For joining the legislative, the life of this liberated subject would be exposed to arbitrary control. For the judge within the legislature. Were joined with these executive power, the judge might behave with all the violence of the oppressor. Guys, one of the things I'm going to argue in class is this. If we actually understood this properly, then having the parties in control of all power is tyranny, regardless of the party in control. If the Democrats control the lawmaking power, the executive power, and the Supreme Court, they are by definition tyrants of a system, and every tyranny will produce rebellion. It's not by accident that Barack Obama, once he was president of the United States, the Democrats controlled the lawmaking process, Barack Obama controlled the presidency, and the Supreme Court was in the hands of the Liberal Party at the time. And that produced what? One of the most violent rebellions with the emergence of a conservative value in the United States and the election of Donald Trump in 2016. So what happens every time? Donald Trump not learning their lesson, Republicans shove legislation through here, they stack the court with conservatives, and they maximize the Trumpian narrative of the Republican Party. So what did they do? Republicans took one tyrant and made themselves the new tyrant. Well, this is predictable. What can we expect to manifest in a society of tyranny? Rebellion. And what do we have? During Trump's, we have more protest, more violent exchanges. Why? Why? We don't understand this. We don't understand this. And if you ask most Americans what they want from the government, they're like, I'm a Democrat. I want the Democrats to control the White House, and I want Democrats to control Congress, and I want Democrats to control the Supreme Court. So you favor tyranny. Well, no, I'm about freedom. No, you aren't. You're not about freedom. I'm about minority rights. No, you're not, because if the Democrats control everything, who's the minority? So the Democrats is preoccupied with minority rights all the time. You tell me, what rights do they give Republicans when they're in charge? Are they really concerned about the rights of the minority? Are they only concerned with the rights of voters that help them secure a majority by which they tyrannize our existence with? The executive power ought to be in the hands of a monarch. Montesquieu saying, based on what the executive power does, it should be in the hands of the monarch. Because this branch of government, which is always the of expedition, is better administered by one than many. Whereas whatever depends on legislative power is oftentimes better regulated by many than a singular person. In other words, laws should be crafted by many, laws should be executed by few. And it just so happens that in the United States we have one president, and we have many lawmakers, and we have few judiciary agents. Our government is not accidental. It's a complex system of fail-safes and checks oriented to maximize the collective good by protecting you from the abuse of government and the abuse of the mob, enhancing freedom by limiting the sphere of improper action. Most obviously, improper action as it would manifest in the government itself. And the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. So we have an Aristotelian conception, we have a Montesquieuan conception of power, we have a virtue ethic built in here, we have fail-safes of impeachments and removals. This system is going to be quite complex. The rest of this class, we're going to start unpacking the layers of this, but it will all come back to these arguments. Every single thing we'll discuss from this point forward will come back to these arguments. Right? I'm out of time. I'll see you on the flip side. Bi-weekly assessment number 2 will be made available today. So make sure you kind of keep an eye on that. If you haven't taken one yet, please go get one done.